right, it is 6 o'clock. We'll go ahead and call this meeting to order. Garrett, would you take the roll, please?
Councilmember McPherson.
Here.
Councilmember Biggs. Here. Councilmember Laraway.
Yes.
Council President Bruce.
Here.
Mayor Steer.
Here, and if you'll join me for the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Thank you. First item is the consent agenda. Any questions or comments?
Councilman Laraway, do you have? Move we approve the consent agenda as published.
Second.
Motion's made and seconded for approval. Is there any further discussion on that motion? Garrett, would you poll the council, please?
Councilmember McPherson.
Yes.
Councilmember Biggs.
Yes.
Councilmember Laraway.
Yes.
Council President Bruce.
Yes.
And that motion carries, and that takes us to public comment. Had Michael Rocco sign up to speak? You may have the floor, sir.
Michael Rocco, 1286 East 4th Street in Cuna. I was here last week at the Planning and Zoning meeting, and the Idaho Transportation was here giving their presentation, which they'll be doing again this evening. And one of the, as I was looking at the responses from whatever, the 120-something, there was some responses about having an expressway. And I know it's a fairly long presentation. I think they took about 20, 25 minutes, but it kind of skirted over the fact of why an expressway is not feasible. So when he or she comes up, I'd like to be able to have more specifics as to why it's not feasible.
Okay. Thank you. That's all I had to sign up. Is there anybody else who wishes to address the council? All right, thank you. Well, then that leads us right into the ITD State Highway 69 project. Thank you for coming tonight.
Thank you, Mayor Steer, members of the council. My name is Mark Wasdall. Do you need my address?
Yeah, if you would.
Okay. Idaho Transportation Department, District 3 Office, 8150 Chinden Boulevard, Garden City, 83714.
Hi, I'm Megan Romanesco with DKS Associates. Address is 704 East United Heritage Court, Suite 204, Meridian, Idaho 83642.
Thank you.
And we're here to present on the State Highway 69 corridor traffic study. Overview, we have a study background and purpose, traffic and crash history, proposed division for the corridor, and public feedback. Our project started and was advertised and scoped as a traffic study. So the background going into the study was the last time the roadway was widened in early 1990s from Amity to Overland, and again in early 2000s from Cuna to Amity. That was in response to increased development at that time, traffic, and to mitigate delays, times, and crashes. And the final build year for the environmental document behind the last construction was 2022. So that put us into a good spot to update that document, or not the document, but just update the corridor. So we wanted to keep traffic moving, allow safe and efficient access, and safe facilities and crossings for bicyclists and pedestrians, noting that both City of Cuna and Meridian in their comp plans have separated pathways 10 foot in their documents. We actually started back in 2019 with a future build year of 2045. In 2020-21, we had a virtual open house number 1, identified points of controversy. One of the organizational differences we found, we figured out that the Overland and Meridian intersection needed to have a high-capacity intersection. For an at-grade, we looked at a one-half continuous flow intersection with the legs on Overland Road. At that time, and I believe still, that ACHD was not permissive of that type of facility. And as I'll talk later on, neither is ITD at this point. There was a strong dislike of through-U intersections on a 5-to-1 basis. A local example of that is State Street at Veterans Memorial Parkway, where you drive through and then pull a U-turn. There was support for an expressway as part of that. And actually our open house happened right when COVID hit, so on the fly, we turned that into the first virtual public open house for ITD. We took somewhat of a breather because of COVID, but then at the same time, ITD headquarters, our executives were wanting us to think through what's more important, driver expectation and standard intersections or incremental performance improvements in a non-standardized intersection. We let that one get decided by a project on Karcher Road in Canyon County. They had some of the features that we'd shown the public, and we let them work through it over the next year and a half, 2 years, where now ITD does not do non-standard intersections, no roundabouts, no through-Us, no CFIs, standard intersections, or overpasses. And also at that time, we had some changes. Your city was working through a railroad crossing study. And so in 23-24, we rescoped, had a contract amendment, we called them supplementals, and we brought in the results from the City of Kuna railroad crossing project. And also we identified 3 scenarios to run that were in sync with ITD's intersection policy. We also updated the traffic outlook from 2045 to 2050 with the new Compass travel demand model update. We met with city and agency staffs to explain what we were doing. We also had a strong push from ITD Development Services, cities of Kuna and Meridian, to give them roll plots of a vision corridor design so they had something in their discussions with the increasing number of development applications. So we did our updates. We had a virtual open house number 2 on April 7th through 21st. We were doing agency presentations to let cities and Ada County Highway District and Compass know what we're doing. We are expecting to final our traffic study report in July of 25.
So this gives you an idea of what the existing and future traffic is on the corridor. So the corridor is broken up into 2 parts for this project. There's the north-south segment, which goes from Overland Road to Kuna Road, and then there's the east-west segment, which goes from Orchard Avenue to the Kuna Road intersection. For the north-south segment, up at the north end, which is the higher volume part of the corridor, the existing traffic is about 37,000 vehicles per day, and by 2050, those numbers are expected to more than double and be around 77,000 vehicles per day. That number of 77,000 exceeds the numbers that we see on Eagle Road today. For the east-west segment of the project, those numbers are actually projected to decrease, and this is because of 2 projects, one to extend Meridian Road south of Kuna Road, and also plans to reconfigure the Kuna Curb intersection to a standard 4-way intersection, both of which those projects were included in the Compass modeling that was used to develop volumes for this project and also applied to our traffic modeling that we use to develop travel times. This is an overview of the existing travel times and future travel times on the corridor. So northbound is the dominant direction in the AM, and southbound is the dominant direction in the PM. And for the northbound AM commute, existing travel times are around 15 minutes, and for the southbound PM commute, the 2023 existing travel times were around 13 minutes. And if we do nothing with the traffic we're going to see in 2050, the southbound is expected to increase by about 3 minutes and northbound up to 42 minutes. With the proposed vision improvements that we're sharing today, those travel times are expected to be slightly better than existing at 14.8 minutes for the northbound AM commute and 11 minutes for the southbound PM commute. We looked at the crash history from 2019 to 2023. There were 579 crashes on State Highway 69, and the majority of those were intersection crashes. The most common crash type was rear end crashes, with also a high amount of head-on crashes at intersections and angle crashes at intersections as well. There were 5 fatalities on the corridor, 3 at the north end, with one of those being at Calderwood and 2 at Victory Road. There was 1 between Columbia and Hubbard and 1 at the Cuna Curve. And just something to note is that 3 of the 5 fatalities were due to a drug or alcohol impaired driver. This gives an idea of where those crashes are concentrated on the corridor. There's a much higher concentration of crashes at the north end because likely because there's higher volumes at the north end, and then also at the major mile intersections is a higher concentration of crashes. 47% of the crashes on this corridor were serious crashes, meaning that they were injury crashes or fatalities, and that number is greater than the Idaho statewide rate of 31% for all roadways in 2023. State Highway 69 was also marked as a high priority safety corridor by ITD in their 2021 safety corridor analysis, and this is because most of the segments on State Highway 69 have a greater frequency of crashes compared to similar corridors in Idaho. Getting into the proposed vision, so for the north-south segment of Overland Road to Cuna Road, the plan is to widen that from 5 lanes to 7 lanes and install a continuous raised median along the entire section of the corridor. This will limit the everywhere but the 1 mile and half-mile intersections to right in, right out only intersections, and the half-mile and major mile intersections will be full access intersections. There will be a buffered 10-foot multi-use pathway on each side of the road, and then there will be right turn lanes added everywhere to improve safety. This is the cross-section for that same north-south segment. Here you have 30 to 50 foot landscape buffer outside of the right-of-way, and there will be an 8-foot minimum landscape buffer between the roadway and the multi-use path, which will be 10 feet wide on each side of the roadway. There will be 3 travel lanes in each direction at 12 feet wide, 8-foot shoulders, and an 18-foot raised median.
Does that include turn lanes?
So the turn lanes when the turn lanes open up for the like left turns, it will be in like where the median
Oh, I mean,
is.
right turns. Kind of like we have it near Flat Meridian.
Sorry.
Right, like Hubbard and Amity.
It does, yeah. That distance includes the turn lanes. So for the existing right-of-way we have on the corridor is 125 feet to 140 feet, and the minimum right-of-way we need is 122 feet. And the goal is to fit within the existing right-of-way where possible. However, for drainage improvements or addition of right turn lanes or left turn lanes, some additional right-of-way or easements may be required. For the east-west segment from Cuna to Orchard Avenue, the plan is to widen Avalon Street to 5 continuous lanes, and this section is broken up into 2 parts. There's a more urban section between Orchard Avenue and K Avenue that has a 7-foot attached sidewalk, and then between K Avenue and Cuna, it will be similar to the north-south segment with a 10-foot multi-use pathway. And again, on this section, right turn lanes will be added everywhere to help improve safety. This is the cross-section for Cuna to K Avenue. It's almost identical to the north-south segment, minus the fact that it's 2 lanes in each direction, and instead of the raised median, it is a 14-foot center two-way left turn lane. This is the more urban cross-section from K Avenue to Orchard Avenue, and again, it has 2 lanes in each direction and a 14-foot two-way left turn lane with 7-foot attached sidewalk instead of the 10-foot multi-use path. Here's an example of the 18-foot raised median. We looked at multiple different widths of median for this project, and we landed on 18 feet, and that's because the 18-foot raised median allows for an F-350 pickup truck to make a U-turn at the mile and half-mile intersections. This is an example of what the multi-use path could look like. The multi-use path will have a minimum 8-foot buffer from the roadway and will be in the entirety of the north-south segment, as well as the section of Avalon Street that is east of K Avenue. And the segment from Orchard to K will again have 7-foot attached sidewalks. The pedestrian and bicycle crossings at the intersections will be single-stage crossings, and for the half-mile intersections, those will be signalized as needed for pedestrians or traffic volumes. There's a few special considerations that we looked at for this project, some of them being limited right-of-way or steep cut and fill slopes. So there's actually a typo on this page. This is just Meridian Road north of Harris Street, and a couple of options for this area is to do tiered pathways, which would put the multi-use path closer to the roadway, but it would be elevated and protected by a barrier. Or in the areas where there's really steep cut fill slopes, the multi-use path could be separated from the roadway by a retaining wall to help limit the amount of right-of-way take needed.
We ran into some special considerations. One was the Cuna curve. With the Meridian Road extension that City of Cuna looked at, that we understand that this is going to go back to a four-way intersection, or actually back in 1931 when the state first constructed the roadway, it was a T intersection, but essentially it's back to the future. The Cuna curve went in 1988. I'll talk about the potential Pell study later because it's not really geometric. The other special consideration was Overland Road intersection. On that one, it said that neither agency now supports really the only viable horizontal solution, which means it has to be a vertical solution. I had some questions as to why we didn't do that in our project. Our project was advertised as a traffic modeling study. If you're going to go look at vertical structures, you need to include structures and topographical survey. Those were not in our advertising or in our scope of work. And I know my friends at Consultant Services at headquarters would say, show me that in your initial advertisement and your contract, and they would tell me 100% you need to do another project, another contract. So that's why that's not there. We've identified it, and all of our work was done with the assumption that a high-capacity intersection would be placed to handle the traffic coming from the south. And SPUI on that one is single point interchange, the interchange type that is at Meridian Interchange now.
So we looked at 3 different options for the project. Outside of the full access option, we looked at a right-in, right-out, left-in option at the half-mile intersections and a right-in, right-out only option at the half-mile intersections. Between all 3 alternatives, the major mile intersections were all full access intersection options. And what we found after doing extensive modeling with all these scenarios was that they all performed really similarly to each other. with the travel times being within 1 minute or less. It wasn't like phase one of the project where some of the more high-capacity options performed better than the others. They all operated really similarly to each other, but what we did see was that when the half-mile intersections were full access, it actually took pressure off of the major mile intersections because traffic was rerouting to those half-mile intersections, and then it was decreasing delay at the major mile intersections.
Our last virtual public open house was April 7th through 21st. We had 1,900 people visited the online meeting. 135 comment forms were submitted, and 18 people gave comments via email or phone call. Roughly, as interpreted, 55% expressed support, 29% did not express support, 16% remain neutral. We'll break down into the specifics so we can understand those comments a little better. We broke them out into supports and concerns or dislikes. Converting the CUNA curve into a standard intersection was unanimous, no negatives, and I've been telling all the agencies that that is a no controversy point to bring up. Widening increased capacity, that was about a 7 to 1-4. Those who did not want to see additional lanes fell into 3 categories. 1, you cannot build your way out of congestion. 2, you're only encouraging more congestion by putting another lane in. And 3 was you should put transit in instead for the 3rd lane. For the buffered multi-use pathway, 28 out of 34 were positive. The remainder, the most common was that we were encouraging 5-6-year-old children to ride bicycles next to a 55-mile-an-hour facility, and we should not be doing that. Raised median, that was, it had 4s, likes and dislikes, more likes for controlling access. It does, you can't make left turns in or out of it. Some people like that, more safety. Those who didn't like it said it would limit access. They were losing existing access. And we did have one fire department comment that it would interfere with their ability to respond to emergency services. Right-hand turn lanes, everyone liked that. That's a no-brainer, no controversy. An overall safety improvement preference for it. No one liked that we did not have an improvement at Overland Road and I-84. So that's something that we know we have to do. Added number of signalized intersections. It wasn't so much that people didn't like half-mile intersections, they just didn't like the signals at them. That was 3 to 1 against, I think. Then the expressway should be considered. That had a good vote block in the first and second open houses. We looked at it after the first open house a little deeper. In terms of funding for ITD, we have a safety and capacity program where if you want to do road widening, it's all of our 6 districts put projects in and they get ranked by return on investment and they compete in that. The return on investment of this expressway was lower than other options, and I think that, Lee over here, I don't know whether you would be able to answer that. I think that's based upon the amount of traffic that it would assist compared to the cost of the facility, that just not enough traffic to push it to a higher return on investment. The other one I'll bring up since it was brought up. The expressway is, as envisioned, is a continuous flow facility. Right now it runs into Overland Road and the interchange. Essentially it runs into a non-continuous flow condition. You'd have to put in something akin to a system interchange, which is what is being constructed at Highway 16 and 84 right now. That's an additional cost. So it would be a high-cost facility for the number of vehicles that are using it at this time and out to 2050. Other comments were acceleration, deceleration lanes should be added.
I had a
Yeah, go
question.
ahead.
So when you talk about the project like Highway 16, and you said the rate of return, are you talking about also having overpasses at each of those intersections throughout 69? When, if you turn it into a freeway, right, you would have an overpass at each of those lights. Is that kind of in your mind what you're thinking? That's
Yeah,
why
I
that
think we
meets
did it
the
with,
cost?
with 1 mile's overpass structures, and I think it also had frontage roads. You could do a hybrid, where you would have access, but you'd have overpasses at the mile. That would cost somewhat less.
I was
So
just-
there are different ways to cut it, but like if you look at Texas, they've got frontage roads, and that's 300 foot of right-of-way, and we're squeezed in at about 125 to 40. So that's a very large right-of-way take
Okay,
to do frontage roads also.
okay. Thank you. I was just, while you were talking about it, I just wanted to clarify it.
One of the more interesting things about this corridor is when the right-of-way was purchased for the widening, the existing deeds, for the most part, were encapsulated in the new deeds. So that was purchased, and if we need to or want to remove rights of way, we have to pay for that. There's a cash value. So that was something that escalated the cost of trying to remove access from a property that has deeded access.
Thank you.
Acceleration, deceleration lanes, the speed here and the number of access points, they would merge, so it would essentially be another lane. You can have decel lanes, but you can't fit in an acceleration lane with that. And then the raised median limiting access. The negatives on that came back more to the north part of the corridor, Meridian, who felt that they were subsidizing growth in the south part of the corridor, and hence they were losing their access. That was pretty much the comments that were coming in off that. So there were a number of comments there for us to reconsider CFIs through use of roundabouts. There was concern about increasing noise and requests for mitigation. We're not a design project, but understand why people would put comments in like that. Poor access at Calderwood, I think that's a left-in only, both directions, but that is within the intersection influence area of anything they look at Overland and 6 Meridian Road, so that they're gonna get a second look. There was lamentation of loss of a rural environment and rural community by putting a more, larger freeway down here or highway. And speed limit changes, those were pretty much down the middle. I found out that whatever corridor study you do, half the people say you better not slow us down, and the other half say slow us down, people are dying. And it's a 50-50 pretty much for projects on that. So, intend to complete the traffic study report. We don't have funding for additional projects. Put a line through the third one. We actually have a hot seal on Highway 69 that will start the week of July 7th through 11. The contract is for 38 workdays, calendar-wise. But beyond that, nothing else was in our budget. I checked our draft ITIP, which will hit the public for comment on July 1st for the entire month of July. Also, in February, the Idaho Transportation Board approved staff to pursue a STAR agreement with Brighton Development. STAR agreement, sales tax anticipated revenue, that's if you have a large enough generator of sales tax. The developer with ITD oversight construct improvements not to exceed $35 million. My understanding is Brighton right now is preliminary design, and they're looking at about 30 million, knowing that at preliminary, your costs aren't finalized. And they really need to get more towards final design because whatever work they have has to be written into the agreement. So first we thought that might get signed this month, but they need some more time to do development work. And we're pretty confident sometime later this summer, they'll be able to encapsulate that into the STAR agreement. I'll also toss in that we have 4 projects of interest along the corridor going on. The first one is the I-84 eastbound auxiliary lane project from Meridian to Eagle. Would add a second northbound lane going into an auxiliary lane that drops at Eagle interchange. We also are designing a second right turn lane southbound. And that one, we expect to have a PSNE bid package this fall. The budget has it at year 32, but that could move up based upon project number 2, which is the I-84 mobility study. We're about a quarter of the way through that. And that one, right now, all the new structures that went in on the interstate permitted 5 lanes to cross underneath. The last inhibiting factor is the 5-mile overpass, 60s rural overpass, which is scheduled to be replaced, I think of 29. I think that's where the structure is in our budget. I'm not sure where ACHD is on their roadway, part of that budget. But we wanted to know, okay, once you can do 5 lanes from the Y to Garrity, do you do a 5-lane? Do you do a 4-lane plus auxiliary? People ask about ramp metering, so we're gonna look at that. So we just wanted to have a handbook to say, okay, we looked at all these and this is how, this is gonna guide us forward. If, let's say it says the 84 auxiliary lane project should be number 1, that could be under construction next year, theoretically. I think that would take a bond sale. The state legislature had given us $20 million for the next 3 years, 2020, and I've been told that some of that money could go to I-84 in the valley. See, number 3, we're negotiating a scope right now with a consultant to look at, it's called State Highway 69 Extension to Blacks Creek Interchange. It's a network connectivity study, one of these high compass level studies to say in 2055, do we need to extend more arterials down to Cunamora? Looking at the growth, I guess Mayfield Springs could be building 24,000 houses in Elmore County, and they could be using Blacks Creek Interchange. So that is essentially background necessary work. If we win number 4, we put in a build grant in January with the help of Compass to do a planning environmental linkages study to put a overpass, move 69 south, and try to decide where Cunamore can be. We really don't want to build 5 bridges over the, is it New York Canal? There's no Indian Creek. I lose track.
Same thing.
No.
Turns into it.
Half dozen one or the other. So all those are in motion. The last one not funded. I think we're going to announce winners and losers on June 28th on that one. But if I haven't overtalked, stand ready for any questions you might have.
Yes,
Sir.
go ahead.
I'm a big fan of HOV lanes, by the way. That'd be kind of a nice Garrity over to the Flying Y, but anyway, but regarding this project, the fire department, you brought up having the concern about the medians, but I was also gonna say on this more southern end that maybe the Meridian side doesn't understand is the farm equipment and tractors and stuff like that. Might be, if an F-350 can make it, there's gonna be probably some trucks that are bigger than that, agricultural and stuff that might have a hard time with that turn. I'm just guessing.
Okay. Yes.
A couple of questions. I'm trying to follow you, but turn lane, I think turn lanes are a big problem. I mean, driving 69, if there's no place for cars to turn, they back everything up. And then you have the ones that are using the shoulder as a lane, which is illegal, and it causes all kinds of problems. So I'm glad you're trying to get the turn lane fixed, because it is a problem. Number 2, have they thought about getting rid of the yellow flashing caution lights on these turns? Because I'm assuming the head-on accidents are coming from that, people cutting across lanes.
Not judging how fast they can.
I'll say, I'm not on the traffic engineering side, but I know on State Street 44 eastbound in Eagle, they removed the flashing yellows in at least one location, probably a couple. because they had too many crashes. On Chinden, before you get to the district, it's Garrett, I believe. It depends what time of day it is. During rush hour, you get no flashing yellows. 8 at night, you get a flashing yellow. So they set it by time.
It's just an opinion. I think you gotta get rid of them. 'Cause
Sorry. I'll also add, when there is 3 through lanes in each direction, it will be restricted to a protected only, all the time.
Okay. I guess the next question I have, why are we going with 7-foot sidewalks?
So the 7-foot sidewalk is just in a very short section from Orchard Avenue to K Avenue. And I believe that just comes from the City of Cuna code. I'm a little bit unfamiliar. I'm filling in for Leah. She would be more familiar with the cross-section, but that's the urban section of code for.
Because I notice on 10 Mile, if you go north, they literally have yellow lines in the middle of the sidewalk.
To separate, is it like a 10-foot multi-use path where they're separating like
Yeah.
the directions?
It's kind of goofy, but anyways. And I do have one last question. This has nothing to do with what we're talking about. Why is Highway 16 Highway 16? It's an even number. Nobody can ever tell me that.
Sorry, sir, I didn't do my homework.
I'm gonna go to bed disturbed now.
Oh,
Because I used to run crashes on Highway 16. I'm like, why is this north and south Highway 16 instead of an odd number?
The first thing I'd look at is our 1952 scan of a 1952 Shell oil roadway map for the state of Idaho, and zoom in and see if they called it 16 then, or there've been some name changes. Because 55 in Canyon County was 72, and it was 15 up in the rest of, up in Valley County, and then it somehow became 55, so. But originally back in, when we started in 1913, they were all just noun names, Old Oregon Trail, and
I just thought I'd ask.
somewhere, there's an answer to that somewhere.
I'm good, thank you.
Mayor, council members, am I okay to ask a question? Sure. Mike Fertusco, Chief of Police, City of Cuna, 793 West 4th Street. My question is, as far as the turn lanes go, I know Councilman Biggs and Councilman Laraway were touching on the turn lanes. Is that the same as if you're running southbound on 69 and you're making a westbound turn onto Hubbard? Is there going to be a turn lane, like Councilman Laraway pointed out? People are driving on the shoulders, and we're getting a lot of crashes, so I just want to make sure it's 3 lanes plus a turn lane?
We heard loud and clear when the first open house. We heard loud and clear in the second, even though we showed it.
Okay, anything further?
I have a hard time knowing where this Highway 69 is because everyone steals the signs.
Thank you for what you do.
Thank you.
Thank you so much.
Thank you very much, appreciate all that.
That must not have
And
been
your presentation was better than the one I saw yesterday.
a picture. That must not have been there very long.
All right, that brings us to the public hearing, and I believe we are to table that to a date certain. Doug, did you want to?
Yeah, for the record, Doug Hanson, Planning and Zoning Director, 751 West 4th Street. So as you can see, there was no case number provided on the agenda for this evening's public hearing item, and the description of the case that you see before you is also incorrect. So we are requesting that that be tabled to a date certain of July 1st, 2025, or a later date if the council deems necessary.
Okay,
July, good. I move we table case number 25-06-S to a date certain of July 1st, 2025.
second.
For the record, sorry, Councilman Bruce, Doug Hanson, Planning and Zoning Director, let me get you the correct case number, because I think what is on the agenda, that number is incorrect as well. So this would be case number 24-09-AN and 24-06-S.
Everyone still okay with July 1st? Councilman Biggs? I move we table case number 24-09-AN and 24-06-S to a date certain of July 1st, 2025.
Second stands. Motion is made and seconded. Is there any further discussion on that motion? All those in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? And that motion carries. Let's see, that takes us to budget workshop. Jared MP.
Thank you, council and mayor. Jared Empey, city treasurer, 751 West 4th Street. So before you, this evening, we have our budget workshop in which we kind of discuss some economic outlooks that we see, and then we also present kind of staff's initial take at the budget. At the second meeting in July, we will have a tentative budget ready, and then in August, the second meeting, we will have our final budget hearing in which the public can add testimony as desired. So for the first item that we have, whenever we try and set a budget, we try and discuss some kind of key gauges as to where we think the economy is heading, or kind of where we think the valley is headed. So kind of the first item that, people usually use is the stock market. And the stock market generally gauges people's future expectations. So the difficulty with that, though, is that no one has a perfect crystal ball, obviously. And this year we've seen the stock market down slightly, or even as a year to date. But there's been a substantial amount of volatility due to different worldwide forces and national forces, which is a sign of people are uncertain as to where things are headed, but people are kind of waiting to see how things turn out. Another key gauge that we use in the budgeting process is the real estate market, which is largely affected by supply and demand. Essentially, the more supply of something, the cheaper the price, or the greater demand is, the greater the price will be. So what we see now is that the real estate market is largely stable. However, there are some underlying currents that we see. One subscription that I subscribe to states that the Treasure Valley year over year has seen growth of about 1.5%. Whether or not that's accurate is to be seen. Everybody seems to get a different number with their assessment from the assessment office. I know mine went up. I talked to a coworker. He said his went down. So, it just kind of depends on how they assessed your property. However, in real terms, I think what's most interesting is to see how the Boise Metro stacks up to other similar-sized metros in the West. And as you can see, the Boise Metro is definitely at the lower end. I think the only one that was lower, I guess there was two, Las Vegas is lower, and Phoenix is lower. However, it's clear that prices have been increasing. In other words, price inflation has been common in most of the West, except for a couple different markets. Then it's also interesting to gauge home builder confidence. And there's a metric that the National Association of Home Builders puts out. And surprisingly, the Northeast, which had been pretty hit hard by COVID, has rebounded a little bit and is actually the strongest. And interestingly, the lowest mark that they give is the Western region. And just so you are aware, anything below 50 is seen as a tough market according to this survey. So it seems that despite this, these national forces, CUNA seems to be kind of breaking with national trends, which is interesting because as you see in the graph provided from essentially the government sources, the interest rates right now are at about 6.75%. And on the graph, you can see that means that we're kind of returning to normal. over the past 20 years or so, we've had a break due to demographic trends mostly. We had a very large generation of baby boomers, and now we're kind of returning to some kind of normal levels. Gen X is quite a bit smaller and isn't able to replace the baby boomer generation as much. The millennials are a little bit larger, and Gen Z is also a little bit smaller. So with that, those are the biggest drivers that I see of interest rates. Aside from things you may see in the news, demographics are the biggest driver of demand. And so as you can see, interest rates have basically returned to kind of a historical norm that we used to see kind of in the mid 70s, where it was about 7.5%. That said, another key gauge that we use is consumer confidence. The University of Michigan puts this out, and as you can see, consumer confidence has kind of taken a hit lately. It's generally, a few years ago it was pretty high, and now it's dropped off quite a bit. There may be several reasons for that, and I won't try and read too much into that. But it is clear that consumers are pessimistic. That isn't to say that they're completely avoiding all purchases. It's simply saying that they're avoiding certain discretionary spending, which we would capture in the state sales tax distribution. Over the past few years, as I said, some of the reasons that people may be seeing that is inflation that could be causing that. And over the past few years, 2022 is kind of the high point of inflation at 8.35. Then it went down to 4.48. Last year it was 3.33. And this year we estimate it'll be about 2.46. However, I don't think that I have the final number for May. They may have put it out in the past few days, and that'll be updated in the tentative budget. A few reasons for inflation. You could say it's onshoring of manufacturing, and one of those is incentivization by new tax changes, specifically the 100% expensing of factories. As I described before, demographic changes and imbalances. Different generations are larger and smaller than others, and that creates an imbalance in the workforce. Some of the items that we see recently within the past week are geopolitical instabilities that can affect energy or that can affect the food supply. And so why does this matter? So we have city budgets are affected by national and international forces at times. For instance, building permits, those are mostly affected by real estate market forces and can swing wildly. That said, when you analyze the stock market and the real estate market, we believe that the building permits will likely stay steady, but expect some slight decline due to economic uncertainty, and due to the fact that interest rates may rise due to some international forces. Property taxes. So property taxes aren't necessarily determined by market forces, meaning they aren't determined by supply and demand. Instead, they're determined by formula that the legislature has given us in House Bill 389 from 2021. And those funds are used to pay for police services exclusively. In fact, in the analysis we did, currently we're at 101%. So essentially 100% of property taxes are used for police services currently. That said, let's see. As such, we suggest an increase in the maximum rate allowed by law to cover inflation and adjusted expenses to capture growth. And this is all despite increases in the levy since, as essentially 2019, the average homeowner has seen a 30% decrease in property taxes owed since 2022. So for instance, I know that, so I did an analysis recently of about 30 homes that had all had their building permits pulled since 2019, with I think there was 2 properties that were more recent, 2022. And it was, the decrease since 2022 is 29.5%. So definitely House Bill 389 has done its part in decreasing people's property taxes since its inception. And interestingly, if you analyze since 2019, certain long-lived residents who have been in the community the longest have seen up to a 65% decrease in their property taxes. So definitely seeing some property tax relief there due to different legislation that's been passed. And all that is despite us taking the full 3% and new construction for the past, I believe, 6 years. That said, sales, another key item that we see in our budget is sales tax revenue, which is driven by consumer spending. As we saw in the graphic, that consumer optimism is fairly low. And so because of that, there's not much that people can actually cut out of their budget to an extent that revenue would fall significantly. However, what we would see is that it wouldn't grow that much, despite the population of the state and the city continuing to grow. So proprietary fund, we see that those are most affected by inflation due to eventual replacement cost of infrastructure. Again, inflation's caused mainly by the scarcity of resources, which can be created by international and national forces. And as such, we suggest increase due to inflation to reserve for operations and maintenance and asset replacement and initial investment in asset expansion. Then finally, we have payroll-related expenses. These often wages, we like to keep those increasing in proportion to inflation rate so that we can maintain a workforce that can actually afford to live in the same community that it works. And as such, one of those suggestions built into the budget is to have benefits covered by the city. Under point 4, to remain competitive, we suggest the city cover the employee portion of health insurance, since often health insurance rises much faster than inflation. Often we see increases of up to 10-12% in health insurance costs, and to remain competitive since many of the other cities in the valley also cover that under their policies. That said, there are a few items that are outstanding for the tentative budget. We don't have the final inflation figure, however, we think that we're pretty close. There are some minor payroll items. For instance, we filled a few positions that were open at the time of this workshop, so those will be updated, so that'll be pretty small. And then the big item will be the council chambers final capital projects number. We had said that it was going to span 2 fiscal years, and that's likely to occur. However, what will happen is we don't know the exact construction timeline, and so we'll update that once we get that within probably the next week or so from the developer. And then one item that I didn't include was building permits for mega projects. One of those is, data centers that we're expecting to have come into the valley. The next page is simply an outline of the expected or the current budget. Despite, increases in budgets, that's, for the most part, the most important number for the consumer is probably the property taxes, in which we expect to take the full extent that we're allowed. We'll know the full number in early August. However, we expect to take the full amount that we're allowed simply to keep up with police services. We understand that police services are expensive, and that we want to make sure that people are safe within our community. And as you'll notice, the total budget numbers have increased each year, but most of that is due to prudent fiscal planning and prudent fiscal saving in order to pay for certain replacement budgets. It's often difficult to predict, predict how much we'll actually have to spend at the time of asset replacement. However, just as a common gauge, when I first came on with the city, we said that in order to do a sewer line for 1 mile, it was $1 million a mile, and lately it's been about $3 million a mile. So there's some limitations to some historical data that we have, mainly due to inflation, and sometimes inflation grows very fast. On the next page, which I think is probably more meaningful to folks, we see what our cash carryovers are. These carryovers, as I said, are used to budget for depreciation and eventual asset replacement. They're accumulated in order to set aside for eventual increases in inflation that we see, and they're also set aside so that we don't have to go bond for when we actually have to replace stuff. You know, it's unfortunate when cities get behind in their capital budgeting, because then it puts a very high cost on the taxpayer. Then as we see the real numbers that one should really pay attention to in budgeting isn't necessarily the first page, but this page where it shows the cash flow summary, in which you can see essentially right now we have the general fund essentially operating essentially at a zero amount. Essentially revenues are about equal to expenses. Some things that could change that are the timing of the construction of council chambers. So you'd see if kind of that construction timeline gets pushed back into fiscal 26, what you'll see is expenses go higher than revenue, just because we'd be pushing some expenses from fiscal 25 into 26. And we'll have that updated by the time of the tentative budget. But some other items that might affect that are just whether some of these large projects within the city can happen within the next year. So we'll be monitoring that very closely for the tentative budget. Some other items that are very important are the Latecomers Fund, the Water Fund, and the Sewer Fund. We expect significant capital investments to occur in fiscal 26, mainly due to the Mason Creek line and other wells that need constructed within the city. And we'll use the Latecomers Fund in order to reimburse those funds that are user fund supported, in order to essentially keep the user ratepayer whole. Then we'll be doing some projects in the Park Impact Fund. We'll have phase 2 of Zamzows Park worked on, and I'm sure that we'll have more details to come on that. And the Police Impact Fund will continue repaying the general fund for its initial investment of, I believe it was $1.9 million to build the police station. And then the URAs, or the Urban Renewal Agencies, those are strictly for information only, but those continue to accumulate funds, and hopefully they'll continue to give us some options for either development or redevelopment within the city. As I said, COLA that we have estimated is 2.46. And then we have some new positions, another building inspector, so that we wouldn't have to outsource as much building inspection. And then we have some parks and streetlight position. Some items that I didn't put on here that I forgot to put on were police. We expect to have 2 new sergeants and 1 detective. And so that was a significant investment by the city, which would bring us to about 28 officers per 33,000 residents, still below the 1 officer per 1,000. However, we continue to get closer, and it's important for us to stay on top of it, especially since we'll be having additional retail development within the city. We all know that when people, instead of leaving the city during the day, they'll work during the day within the city, which means an additional call load. So we want to stay on top of that for the future. And so, as such, some basic ideas that are built into the budget are property tax, that we would take the 3%, and we'd take the maximum new construction. Again, that isn't likely to actually increase people's property tax bills. As we've seen, people's property tax bills have actually decreased by about 30% over the last 3 years. And then water, sewer, PI, trash, water and sewer east, we would suggest a 3% increase. We understand that that's higher than the official inflation number. However, these funds are particularly hit by inflation, especially due to software costs. For instance, in order to read what someone's water usage is, excuse me. In order to read someone's water usage, we use a software from Core and Main. And last year that software was $17,000. This year it's $34,000. So essentially a doubling of cost. BDS, which is one of our lockbox providers for check payments, they're increasing their rates from 10 cents per transaction to 25 cents per transaction, so a 250% increase. And then iCrimp, which is our insurance carrier, is increasing its rates by 26%. The reasons they cite are increasing property values, and the second reason that they cite is reinsurance markets. Essentially what that means is catastrophes that have occurred around the world have raised rates, and there's nothing they can do about it. So essentially what we're doing with our budget is essentially trying to control what we can control, make sure that the city is self-sufficient, and that we're staying ahead of trends rather than waiting for trends to affect us so that we have to put an additional burden on our citizens. Obviously, we have a lot more data that we could go over, but at this point I want to see if anyone has any questions or concerns.
Okay, questions from council?
I do.
Yes.
Thank you, Jared. There's a lot of information to go over. When I look at what we spent year over year, it looks like, if I can find the page, we're only spending about $3 to $4 million more every year. Is that correct? And the rest is just going into savings?
Councilmember Bruce, I'm not exactly sure. You'd have to point to a specific on that, but I mean, depending on the fund, that may or may not be true.
And then I did have another question. Meridian actually does like an all-day like a workshop. Have we thought about doing anything like that where we sit down with the directors and look at what their plans to spend are, what items they have, or is that just done kind of in-house?
We are willing to do whatever you would like. We haven't done that in the past, but it's certainly something that's open if you would like to do that.
Yeah, so Councilman Bruce, so basically the process works that in order for brevity, because obviously a budget workshop could go on for hours, and in order to streamline the process, basically we as staff spend about 2 months kind of developing our internal budgets. And then I go and whittle down their budgets to some more manageable levels. And then what happens is during the budget workshop, we present to city council and the mayor our official budget proposals. And then you have an opportunity to make any comments you'd wish.
Okay. Thank you.
Okay, anything further? All right. Very good. Thank you, Jared.
Thank you, Jared.
Jared actually gets quite a reputation for whittling things down. Let's see, all right, ordinance. Consideration to approve ordinance number 2025-15. An ordinance of the City Council of the City of Cuna making certain findings and enlarging the boundaries of the Cuna Municipal Irrigation System by the inclusion of Ada County Assessors Shauna Shell, 429 South Swan Falls Road, and declaring water rights pertinent thereto are pooled for delivery purposes, and directing the city clerk to record this ordinance as provided by law, and directing the city engineer to provide the notice of this ordinance to the Boise Cuna Irrigation District, the owners, and update the irrigation system map, and providing an effective date.
I move we waive 3 readings of ordinance 2025-15.
Second. Motion's made and seconded. Any further discussion on that motion? All those in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Motion carries.
I move we approve ordinance 2025-15.
Second. Motion is made and seconded for approval. Is there any discussion on that motion? Garrett, would you poll the council, please?
Councilmember McPherson?
Yes.
Councilmember Biggs?
Yes.
Councilmember Laraway?
Yes.
Council President Bruce?
Yes.
And that motion carries. And then we need to retire to an executive session. We won't be making any decisions when we come back out, so this is purely informational, but
Who all do we need?
we need to have Mayor, Council, Doug, Mark, and Jared.
Somebody. Move we move to executive session under Idaho Code 74-2061D, and we will need the mayor, council, Doug, Mark, and Jared.
Second.
Motion is made and seconded. All those in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? And that motion carries.
Thank you to our audience for coming.
Yeah, so if you will excuse us, we will have this session and